Part 37 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. This is a continuance of the last two parts of Shawn Driz's 2018 deposition. So we left off on the last part where Shawn was talking about his friend who he calls family, Alex Derville, who was there that night. Alex was there with his girlfriend at the time, Alyssa Arnold. They're both on the security footage. She's screaming and fighting with Alex because Alex is a part of the problem. He wasn't helping the victims. He was in it and he was aiding the Drizzes in them in finishing the job. He was not helping the nice guy staff who was out there trying to pull them off of bodies and stuff. Nope. And Shawn said, and I quote, Alex was the only one not involved in any way. So you know what that means. This would also be the first time that Ray Nicholson is brought up in our case. Shawn mentions his name and says he was not involved in any way either. You know what that means. And by the way, I remember when I was watching the deposition videos and taking my notes and stuff years ago, and I remember sitting there and I had to email my attorneys immediately after, and I was like, yo, I just watched the deposition. There's so many witnesses that we need to subpoena. That, like, what? Like, so it was because of that I started the ball rolling where we got Alex Derville and Alyssa Arnold to be deposed, and I will cover that soon, and it's a doozy. So next in the deposition, Shawn tells another lie. He perjures himself again. And he says, and I quote, Anne Green claims, and I'm very upset about that I was stomping her on the ground. End quote. I have never said that. I've always said from day one, I don't have any memory of the assault because I was hit in the back of the head when I had my back turned, and I lost consciousness before I hit the ground, and I woke up a while later, and it was after all of the defendants had fled the scene, and it was like the ambulances were there, the cops were there. So I've never had any recollection of who assaulted me. It was just all the other witnesses that testified they saw their group assaulting me. So yeah. And then Shawn starts complaining that he's never been able to tell his story to anybody. Then he admits that the Twitter posts that I found and gave to my attorneys to bring to the deposition were his from part 34, if you didn't see that, barf bag included. And then it ends for now because Shawn says he has to leave the deposition because he has to go to work at a law firm called Immigration America. I love how it makes sense. And then it gets continued to like a month later. So Shawn's deposition starts again like a month later. And obviously all of our attorneys have had time to kind of fact check all the stuff that he said. And one of the attorneys asks him, hey, how come Immigration America doesn't seem to have a website? Which it doesn't. Go look it up. And Shawn goes, he refuses to answer why. He refuses to answer any questions about his job. Then he's asked, well, who are the attorneys that work at this law firm? And he says, I refuse to answer that. And then he starts laughing. At this point, when I was watching the deposition videos, I noticed two things. Because, I've been doing like acting modeling for 20 plus years. So you can tell when somebody's coached. You can tell when somebody is a bad or a good actor, I see it every single day. And I noticed at this point, Shawn, remember, like I've seen his tweets and all that stuff. So I know his vibe. And I noticed that he said the word father, like so many times. Like it was weird how many times he said it. And the other thing he kept saying so many times, he said, my family. He said it 32 times up until this point in the deposition. It was really weird. And at one point my attorney said to me, I forget, maybe a few years ago, they were like, it looks like Shawn is a really loyal family person. And it looks like this was just a one-time incident. And I was like, oh man, this kid is tricky. Like you can tell it sounds like he's been coached and everything, where he's just like pulling the wool over people's eyes. Next, Shawn says that he was told by two people that someone ran across the street and hit his father, Maurice Driz. He says my dad was bleeding. His entire face was covered in blood, which apparently he had makeup wipes in his pocket and cleaned it before the security footage got it. So that was miraculous. The attorneys say, okay, you have two witnesses. I mean, you had your whole group of your closest friends and family there. Let's talk to these witnesses. He says he won't reveal their names. Also, while Shawn was talking about this mystery witness who saw everything that could just blow the lid off of this case, this mystery witness saw me beating his father up, but Shawn refuses to name their name, and he says it with a big smile on his face. Shawn said that these two witnesses saw everything, that they took a step back and watched. Which is interesting because down the line at the civil trial, that's what Ray Nicholson said in his deposition, or before the civil trial. He said that he watched. He stood there and watched. So that was really helpful. Anyways, Shawn was asked, well, did these people give a statement to Robert Shapiro, your guys' attorney, or anybody else? And he said, I refuse to answer that. Shawn also refused to answer whether or not Ray was at the birthday dinner preceding this. I also want to just throw in there, Ray never, ever, ever made a police report. He never gave a statement to anybody in all the years. But he did admit later in his deposition he stood there and watched the entire thing. Makes me wonder if Ray was doing really horrific illegal things on the footage that TMZ got, and if that's the reason why everything was put away. So then next in the deposition, my attorneys had Shawn Driz watch footage in slow motion, frame by frame, of the assaults from the security footage. And while he was watching Will Jolson, one of the other defendants in the civil, while he was watching him kick somebody on the ground, he said, Will Jolson would never kick somebody. So this is Alex Derville, one of the men who was part of the group who was escalating the violence in the security footage, yet somehow slipped through the criminal charges, slipped through being deposed for years, slipped from giving a police statement. He has his own law firm now. Isn't that interesting? Yep, and to quote Shawn, he said, Mr. Derville did not hit anyone. He just sat back and watched. Google him, check out his law firm. Okay, so we're now at the tail end of Shawn's deposition, and he's trying a new narrative. And the new narrative, he actually said, well, there was only 6 of us, but there was 20 people fighting. So what he was trying to he goes into this whole thing saying that, okay, first of all, it was just 2 people in the group, like, being assaulted and stuff, which was my brother and then the other male plaintiff, because me and the other girl were off to the side, off camera. She had my body, and she was checking my pulse and, like, having a breakdown. So who are these other dozen or so people? Shawn was trying to say that it was a mystery group of people that, like, came out of nowhere and started throwing punches and all this stuff. So I like how that makes a lot of sense. He does that a lot. And then Shawn starts laughing and joking and, like, schmoozing it up with my attorney. And he says, I'm not an attorney, but I'm about to be one. Like, and he names my attorney and just starts laughing and giggling. And he's, like, in the best mood. And it's so eerie and so creepy, and I cried when I watched it because I just didn't understand what his mind is. Like, it just, I don't know. So then we talk about too, that my attorney said, well, we asked for your text messages and phone information, like, because obviously you're supposed to subpoena that because that would tell us a lot. And Shawn just ignored it. And by the way, to this day, they've ignored it. They've never had to hand it over, even though my attorneys told me we, like, subpoenaed it, and they said that in the deposition. They were like, we asked for it. You're supposed to give it to us. So that was really weird. Then Shawn says, I don't own a computer either. Yet he works at a law firm and he's loaded. So that's really weird. And he says that he can't help with any of the phone stuff, the text info, anything, because he said Blaze Pizza paid all of my bills. So no access to phone records. And he didn't know if his phone bill was under his name or Blaze Pizza's. Like, he just doesn't know. Yet Blaze Pizza was never subpoenaed for any of that stuff either. None of that was handed over. Nobody tried to help us in our quest for justice. So I just want everybody to remember that. I'm going to have to do a whole part on exactly who, what, and where to boycott, because this should be a little more organized. But I've kind of got a lot on my plate. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to do the rest of the depositions. I might sneak some other stuff in there because my mind will just remember random stuff. But thank you guys so much for all the support. And I would love advice, more legal advice, even though it's technically not legal advice, but just everything, because you guys are following along and you know more about this than most people. So thank you so much.